Hi everybody, this is part 2 of our pattern making intensive for First Year Fashion Studio with Mark Neighbour, and today we're going to look at several different types of skirts that are very easy to construct in order that you can do your second assessment where you have to design and make a skirt of your own. So, hi Mark, how are you?
Hi, good, thanks Lydia. Nice to be here today.
Yes, lovely.
QT Fashion Studios. So, okay, we're going to start with this one. Just a quick review of our half-scale skirt block. So this is literally a full-scale block. It's been cut in half and it fits our half-scale dummies really well. So it has the two back darts in it and just the one front dart there. And just straight around the hem. And
two side seams, and that's the one we were using when we made our yoke skirt and our gored skirt and our panelled skirt in the first intensive.
Exactly. So this has darts, it has side seams and everything. So these ones here are just gathered. So they literally have no side seams. They only have a centre back seam so that you can put a zip in there or some sort of opening. And this first one is 1.5 times the waist measurement. So our waist measurement full scale is about 70 centimetres, which means that, you know, a full scale that would be, 1.5 times that would be 105 centimetres.
Which is normally big enough, isn't it, for a size 8 to 10 hip?
Exactly.
Narrowish fit, not much volume.
Yeah, so you can see here that they're pretty, even though this has got all the gather in the top there, it's really just gathered in to fit the waist, but the hip measurement is really only probably about 5 centimetres in full scale different to our straight skirt block.
Right, so that's like the kind of skirt that you made when you were a little girl. You were making skirts for your dolls because it's just made literally from a rectangle of fabric.
Exactly.
So to get a skirt like that, you just simply measure the waist, you multiply that by 1.5 times, and that is the length of the fabric that you cut. And then for the length of the skirt, you just measure how far down your body you want it to be and add a bit of hem allowance.
Exactly right. So this one here, this is a bit fuller. This is actually 2 times the waist measurement. So that's about, I say about 150 centimetres that would be around the hip here. And you can see one thing that you have to keep in mind when you're thinking about this amount of fullness and working in half scale is that because this is half scale and it's almost like this fabric, you have to think of the fabric as being like a full scale fabric. So it means that this fabric is really on a half scale dummy. It's twice as thick, or it has twice as much body as it would do when you're working on something in full scale.
So when you doubled all of those measurements, the skirt wouldn't look nearly as crisp in that calico as it does on the half scale dolly.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's what's so nice about half scales is everything looks cute and puffy and nice. But yeah, if you took this up to full scale, it would be like, it wouldn't be quite as fluffy and full.
So if you wanted to achieve that exact effect on the full scale pattern, you could use 2 layers of calico and that would be exactly the same stiffness.
Exactly right. Yep. So you could line the skirt with calico, which means that you could bag out the hem as well, so you wouldn't need to do a hem. And like I know in some couture garments they actually do an unpressed hem.
Yep.
So the hem could just go around and maybe the lining section would be a little bit shorter. So
or you could actually cut it double the length and fold it up, double the width and fold it up.
Good point as well. So
and
this is just a fold. So it comes down and then folds back up again.
And then you can really play with the volume that you've got in the garment because you can tuck it and catch it in different places.
Exactly.
So very versatile for such a simple pattern. Again, that's just a rectangle. So, for example, pretend that the skirt is, say, 65 centimetres long. That's around knee length. So the piece of fabric that you would cut would be 65 centimetres plus seam allowance and hem allowance. So, say, 70 centimetres from waist to hem. And then you would add about 1.5 times for the gathering, 1.5 times the waist for the gathering, which comes to 140 centimetres. So the piece of fabric would be 140 centimetres around the body and 70 centimetres from waist to hem cut.
Exactly. The other thing you could do with this too, we've got gathers here, but you could also turn them into tucks.
Mm-hmm.
Tucks could be just, like you sort of tuck it up as you go along.
Yeah, Mark can never help himself. He always wants to design something more than we've got in front of us. We're just talking about really simple gathered skirts here, people.
Sure,
We are
right.
not talking about tucks today.
No, all right.
That's another video.
I was going to get onto pleats, so I won't even go there.
Don't even go there.
All right, so here we've got 3 times, so this is 3 times the gather, so 3 times the waist measurement here, and you'll see this is really nice and full and fluffy.
Isn't it gorgeous? It looks like a little 50s housewife.
Yeah, and
Skirt.
and I think maybe by the time you're getting to this stage as well, unless you do have it, like lined with, with a self fabric or something that maybe shaped well or
Yeah.
something like that. If you don't have it lined with those to get this to sit out away from the body in full scale, you probably need to start thinking about having a petticoat. So like a tulle petticoat to go underneath it. And sometimes you can buy petticoats ready made because they do take a lot. They take a lot of fabric and they take a lot of work to make.
And sewing with tulle is absolutely horrible.
So you could you could buy one for like $30 on eBay or something.
But a lot of old 50s dresses and skirts have got a violin interlining in them, haven't they?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So they use a violin, which is like a non-woven interfacing.
A stiff one.
We're used to having interfacing with glue on it, but violins generally don't have any glue, so it's just another layer that gets sewn together with the outside layer.
So you often look inside those old 50s dresses and you see the layer of violin and the layer of fabric basted together, so hand tacked with great big tacking stitches inside the seam allowance, so you can't see it from the outside of the dress, but they then sewed it as one piece. They sew the violin and the outside layer as if it were one piece of fabric.
And it's also, in that instance, sometimes too, it's good because you can turn the hem up and you can actually stitch the hem onto the violin,
Yep.
the backing, so you don't see any stitching on the outside of the garment, which
Yep.
is a lovely finish. Okay,
Very nice. So they're all our gathered skirts. And then the next in our lineup, I see we have an A-line skirt, which is one of the ones we did in the first pattern making intensive.
And the reason we wanted to show you this, we popped this one in here because we're working our way up to circle skirts, and we would like you to compare the two, the A-line skirt here, which we've created from our skirt block. So as you remember, we used this one and then we moved the darts, we pivoted the darts down into the hem to get fullness here.
That's the straight skirt block, and then we adjusted that to make the A-line block, didn't we?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right. So the A-line block still has some shaping over the hips, and it still has darts.
Yeah, you can see the curve there. And what the difference between these, and we'll talk a bit more about the quarter circle in a minute, but you can see here how we still have fullness in the hip here, so
Yeah.
it does tend to give a bit of a rounded shape here.
And we can control that amount of fullness too, because we've got side seams and darts to play with.
Yeah, you can manipulate that and you can take out
Yeah.
some of that fullness if you need to.
Or add some in if you have someone who needs a hippier kind of silhouette.
Exactly.
And then, so this next one,
Is a quarter circle skirt, and you'll see here that the quarter circle skirt doesn't have side seams, it only has a centre back seam, and again that's for the zip to go into. And what you'll also see, well, maybe not so easily on the video,
Mark,